working, so the floor above has working toilets on. But yeah, I'm super pleased to welcome you all here today and to welcome Anne Lister Italia, who are going to give us a wonderful talk. So yeah, take it away.
So, hello. First of all, I'd like to thank you for coming, for being here today. Calderdale Libraries and the West Yorkshire Archive for not only hosting this talk, but also for making this all possible with the availability of Anne Lister's journals online. And a special thank we always want to express is to all the code breakers and all the people who work to the project that can bring Anne to people. That's the first heartfelt thank you. But now, who we are now? I'm Lucia, Irene, Trotta, and Francesca, Raia. We started in 2020 this Anne Lister Italia project, and that was just aimed to bring Anne Lister to Italian people, because Italians are not so keen on foreign languages, and especially English, of course, which is the most common. So we thought we want to translate and bring this extraordinary woman to our friends and people, and we decided to start with a website, which is the easiest way. This turned soon into a research project, and next to the translations, which we constantly update and add to the website, translations from English material to Italian, which means also the researchers from not only about Anne Lister, but also about Anne Walker and what goes around them. Research will tell you something about it in this talk, and of course also talks, like today. We are also doing these talks in Italy on a different level, because it's still an approach in our country. And this is what we are carrying on currently. This is how we work.
Yeah, to summarize our process, so everything is clear from this moment on when we talk about our research and what we did, is that the point where we start from usually is, of course, transcriptions. Transcription are fully done by us, by Francesca. She's the one that transcribes everything from letters, Lister diary, everything, every document, also things that we find in Italy, documents that comes from our archives. So anything to do with that is usually the first step. So when we want to focus on something, we start with the transcription of it. After that, usually there's some further research, because people's names comes up, places, things has to do with 18th and 19th century, and customs and traditions. So some things need to be researched even further if we want to talk about them and give a context. After that, we select the material that we want to work on and share, because we know how much Anne wrote, and we cannot publish everything all the time. After that, we focus on translation. So as Lucia said, we want to make everything we do available in Italy and in Italian. So of course, anything that starts from the English gets translated in Italian. And as we went on and started to do some research in Italy, we also started from Italian material. So we're doing some translations in English. So if we find something related to Anne Lister, Anne Walker in Italy, we want to make it accessible then for a broader audience. So that happens. After that, once we have all the material that we need, we package everything together. So a strong point for us also, the presentation of it, the design, what we are trying to convey, how we can convey it in the simplest way, depending on, and the clearest way possible, because sometimes it's a lot of information. And then we share it. We have, the things we do most often is the day-to-day. So we do start from quotes that happened on, a certain day, and we tend to publish them and write something about them on Instagram day by day. And when we have, let's say, more complex research, then we do an article on our website that is usually available both in Italian and English. And so that's our way to kind of collect everything together. Francesca is the person that transcribes everything. Lucia is the one that translates everything. I'm the one that puts everything together and design it. And then, of course, each one of us gives their own input on all the other steps. Sometimes we want to know some specific thing about, I don't know, the 19th century, and we're curious to see if there's something in the transcriptions, or maybe we start from something that has to do with Italy, and we want to know if Anne talked about it, saw it, etc. So it's not always this linear, but this is the easiest way to kind of present it. And yeah, so now we dive into the research and the project.
Now, why are we here today? As Irene said, we are working a lot on the day-by-day material, meaning our sort of a signature framework is based on this day. So everything we post on Instagram or on social media is related to that very specific date, meaning today is the 12th of July. Why did we choose today to make this talk? It is that because today, in 1827, Anne Lister, Maria and Jane Barlow arrived in Italy. So this is, if you go on the social network, we are posting today the first glimpse on their arrival. So what we did was in 2021 we started this tour together with them in those very same days. So the 12th of July we described their entrance in the country, and then we followed them in their footsteps, retracking them, reconstructing where they went and what they saw, who they met. We also found the names correspondences matching with what we found in other documents. So this is basically what we have done in the first thing about the going to Italy on social media, and they're still there on the website. It was basically in Italian because it was done for the Italian audience by then, and we were still so famous with our colleagues, fellows in research abroad. So this is basically what we have done. As we followed the process that Irene showed, so Francesca has been transcribing the whole journey, and starting from that we chose some specific excerpts and translated them, and Irene created this visual so to give the perception, to bring it even closer to people.
So this is the Italian itinerary of the travel. You can see she stayed in Italy for 40 days plus 2 days because she came back in September with Maria and Jane. But before we start illustrating the journey,
Yes.
we must point out that Italy wasn't yet united. As you close, if you could see the map, you can see that this is the area that Anne Lister traveled through, while, as a matter of fact, our country was divided in the Sardinian Kingdom, which was in the northeastern. It included also parts of France, like the Nice County and the Savoia Duchy. Then there was the Grand Duchy of Tuscany, here, the Kingdom of the Two Sicily, which extended throughout the southern area, and then there was the Lombardo-Venetian Kingdom. This kingdom had been established in 1815 as a result of the Congress of Vienna. It extended from the northeastern area of the peninsula, and it was under direct control of the Austrian Empire. When Anne Lister traveled to Italy, she and the Barlows entered through the Splugen Pass, then visited all the main cities like Bozen and Trient, which now are part of Italy, but then were part of the German Confederation, and they were under direct control of the Austrian Empire. Then again, Verona, Padua, Venice, Mantua, Milan, and then they left Italy through the simple pass. Among all these cities, they also visited many smallest, never heard of villages. One of them is Acqua Petrarca. You may wonder why did Anne stop to such a poor little village, as she herself described, where she was pestered to death by children begging for some money and for some food. Well, Acqua Petrarca was a little village near Padua, where the greatest Italian poet, Francesco Petrarca, or Petrarch, had lived for some years until his death in 1374. On their way to Venice on the 26th of July, Anne and the Barrows made a brief stop in Acqua Petrarca and visited its villa. Well, Anne was fascinated by the views on the Euganian Hills from the villa itself. The fresco paintings can be still seen today, and the garden around that surrounded the house. Well, she remarks the fresco paintings, and they also took a glimpse of the Petrarch's tomb next to the cathedral, and the fountain that now has been named after him is called Fontana di Petrarca. If you have read Anne Lister journals, you probably see that Petrarch's name comes up a lot, especially in the Boothby monuments in 1835, where she writes down copies. Okay, she copies the passages from Petrarch's house. Okay, sorry, I got a bit emotional. Well, we have come across different extracts from Petrarch's works that she had copied down in her journals. That's because she somehow felt a sort of connection with Petrarch. On the 31st of May, while in a conversation with Mrs. Mill, she wrote, "We were like Petrarch and Laura. She had just done enough to keep my interest alive and no more." That's because Anne compares herself, and we think Mariana, to Petrarch and his lifelong lover Laura, because she, just like Petrarch, had realized that
Excessively idealized. That's the concept of ideal love, far away ideal love.
The ideal love, the realization of love.
Yeah. But this is one example of how this specific quote is we like it, because it's a specific example of how our study, our personal backgrounds, our education in Italy, we have to learn, I don't say by heart about Petrarch, but nearly. It's one of the nightmares of education in Italy, actually. But this is how we think we can add or bring something on the table to the interpretation of what Anne writes, because sometimes we all know that when Anne writes, it's not always completely clear who she's referring to, or so that's something we like to see. So. Now, further on, of course, this was an example as one of the smallest villages, but there are so many other examples scattered here and there along the journey of small places which may have some similar significances. But coming to the main towns that she visited, Venice, of course, we can't miss it. Venice was at that time one of the two capitals of the Lombardo Veneto. And how many of you have been to Venice? I guess, yeah, nearly everyone, or at least you know something. You know that it's a unique town, and Anne actually described her as a singular town, as a fallen mistress of the world commerce. The Serenissima, the old republic, was fallen, and Venice had gone through the French and Austrian domain, so it was quite a beaten town if you met people. But the town itself, still today, looks quite the same. Basically, there are just very, very few things Anne describes in her journal that are not there anymore. I counted, well, a handful really is more than enough to say these are not available anymore. And this is also one of the reasons why I think Anne can be important for us and for who wants to learn something about Venice. Because of course Anne traveled the town as any tourist would do. She would say, I saw all the lions, the highlights of the town. So the Palazzo Ducale, the San Marcos Church, St. George. But she also left. She also left us a memory of things that are not there anymore. Like in one, this is a picture I took last year, and it was an old palace, an ancient palace, who had just been opened to the public since early 20th century. It's called Palazzo Manfredini. So you can see this is how it is today. Today it's owned by the Anish Kapoor Foundation. It will become a contemporary art gallery, or sort of. But it's still like this, so it's ruined and it will be left like this. What is interesting here is that you can see the signs here, these frames. These frames were the places where the paintings were hanging, because this was an art gallery, a private-owned art gallery of the Manfredini family. But this collection, Anne visited it and describes it as she did. She numbered the rooms. So in room K, there was this painting, and this painting. So we went through the inventories of the auction when the collection was dismissed, and actually I could follow Anne's directions. So this is an example of what is going to be in some places. Other places like the Church of St. Paul's and St. John and Paul's, the Basilica, Anne describes a painting of Titian, the Martyrdom of St. Peter, which is no longer not there, but it's no longer because it burned 40 years later. So it's a masterpiece that went lost forever, and we still have a description of it being there. So that's why I think it's very important for us and to make Anne available and its writings available, because they can add something to research. What's also interesting is that she was a tourist in these places. So, as I said, she visited also these art galleries, but she, being Anne, she also did things and visited places that were quite uncommon for a lady of the time. So what she did was actually the first place she went to was the Arsenale, which was the warehouses and the boat warehouses, and where they made ropes, the corderie, and today it is the seat of the Biennale, the Art Biennale. So that wasn't a lady. That wasn't very likely to find a lady strolling around there and asking people how much they earned and how many people were working there. So now today that place is partially a military area, so it's not accessible. But by that time, it was all a commercial area and people working. It was like really a town in the town. So that was one example of how precious it can be to have Anne's point of view over these things, because there are descriptions, but very sharp and technical. Let's say I say very dry, not so well like Anne's. It's hard to describe what Anne puts in her descriptions. And the other thing that always made me laugh is another not very ladylike thing in that sense was she asked her rower on the gondola to approach two Turkish frigates, which were two huge boats moored in the center in front of St. Marcus there, in the basin of St. Mark. And she jumped on the boat and she asked things to the captain, while he and his second were just on their knees, chatting on their own. I mean, and I would love to go back through time and see these two men wondering what's happening here, because that must have been the thing. And so this is what, I mean, you can find many things about Venice. You will find many more things about Anne in Venice, but this is what Anne gave us. What we want to see, to tell you, is what Anne can give us and what it can mean to us for these things. But Venice was not the only main town, of course.
Yeah, another main town that she visited was Milan. And before starting with this, just wanted to add something that just came to my mind, is that, as you said before, Venice didn't change much. So it's interesting to visit some of the Italian places because, as well, Milan of course changed, but for example, the structure of the city didn't. So the center of the city has the same streets, different names, but the layout's the same. So it's not difficult when you're there to actually follow her footsteps quite neatly. I mean, if she turns left, you have to turn left. It's not different because these big cities, of course, didn't change so much in the layout, and so you actually find the same things. It's not that difficult to imagine her doing the things that she describes. So Milan was another big city that she visited. You have to imagine that in 1827, as Francesca said earlier, Italy is not what Italy is today, and we have Rome as a capital today. At the time, Venice and Milan were the capitals, so of course, their importance was even bigger in a way. And following in Anne's footsteps and reading her travel journal, we can see that at that time Milan was going through quite a transition of powers, because, for example, she describes the Arc du Simplon, that today is known as Arco della Pace, the Arc of Peace, and Napoleon had started the construction of this monument gate. But after his fall, it was stopped and abandoned, so it stayed kind of not finished. But the works restarted only the year before Anne's visit, and she notes how that arc in 1827 was then under the current Austrian Emperor Francois I, and so it was repurposed. It was dedicated to him. The name changed and the purpose of the art changed, but through our description, we do see Milan under this changing process. Another very interesting thing is that there were a lot of work in progress at the time in Milan. For example, the cathedral, the Duomo, was still under construction. And she notes how only the central nave was completed. They were still putting marbles down inside the cathedral. And she also notes the nearly 5,000 statues that were being put on front and all over the place in the Duomo Cathedral. We're looking at a 1816 picture because it's one of the closest kind of look to what Anne must have seen at the time. And we have right now another big construction right behind the cathedral, which wasn't there at the time. And the funny thing is that, of course, she's impressed by this Gothic cathedral, but she does say York Cathedral has spoiled me. So, I mean, I appreciate it, but nothing comes close to, the York Cathedral. Another interesting place that she visited was the Brera Gallery. So, it's an art gallery, still an art gallery. And she finds there The Marriage of the Virgin by Raphael, and she knows that that's one of the most beautiful paintings that she ever saw. And one interesting thing about this that kind of ties in with what we were saying before is that the Brera Gallery didn't change much. So actually you can go there and spot the same paintings almost in the same spots. So for example, she describes the Agar and Abraham by Guercino next to St. Peter and Paul by Guido Reni, and they are still next to each other. So as an experience to go to Milan, of course, it's interesting to follow in her footsteps. And one thing that we did, because our first meeting as a team, because we're scattered all over Italy, was actually in Milan. And we followed our footsteps. We found, an old map of the city of Milan, dated 1827. And it's interesting how, of course, this map is very detailed. So you have, for example, the numbers of each house, of each shop, of everything. As I was saying before, the street names, which are changed. The layout is the same, but the name of the streets is different because, when Italy was united, things were, of course, dedicated to Garibaldi and people that did, made Italy what it is. And so some namings are different, but again, Anne can actually guide us because she's so precise when she says, I went to this shop to buy a hat, and it's in this road at this number. And if you follow this map, of course, because then the way numbers are placed on buildings changed and the system is different, but if you do follow this map, you actually can go in that precise corner at that precise point. And the funny thing is that there's no straw hat seller anymore. There is La Rinascente, which is the biggest, let's say, shopping place.
Department store.
Yeah, department store in Milan.
The purpose is still there.
The purpose of that area around Duomo is basically the same. It was for shopping then, it is for shopping now. And which is quite interesting if we think, the changes Milan went through and, the years that passed, it's basically 200 years. All right, I'm gonna move on. Yeah, we have some Italian anecdotes from the travel journal that we find amusing, let's say, which are, all things that she finds interesting or weird or specific about Italy. So, for example, she describes, serenades happening in Verona, which is one of the most romantic cities even now, because it's the city of Romeo and Juliet, and that's appropriate, we'd say, that she was, awakened last night between 1 and 2 by some of the gentlemen of the town serenading their loves. Also, that image, it's very interesting.
It wasn't just Shakespeare's invention, apparently. So
Yeah,
it was the Italian attitude in Verona.
And then we have this very funny one when she first, she tastes the first ice cream and she's scared that it could be too cold, so she kind of mixes it with a little bit of hot water. If you think about it, she spoiled it, let's be honest. It was better if it stayed cold. Then she'll eat more ice creams and she doesn't do this anymore. She's like, okay, I'm safe. I don't have to water it down. And then, this is very, peculiar. She's the first time she sees tomatoes growing on a plant is in Italy. She's surprised about that. And also about people selling frogs she thinks at the start that there are little birds from flying, and she goes near it and it's like, they do eat frogs apparently. So these are some
Ready to be eaten, because that's what it
like a street food.
Yeah,
It's
it was a street food for her. It was quite odd things for her, but quite normal for us still today. I mean, we eat frogs. I don't know about you, but in certain zones they're very. And these are also typical things that she would find interesting and useful, because she always wanted to know exactly where she was. And she noted that a good thing was that at the beginning and at the end of every village, the name of the place was written on the first and on the last house, possibly. So that was one of the things she would point out and appreciate. Like she wouldn't appreciate the other way around, the churches being closed for the lunch break, let's say. So she noted these things in there. And the two titles, you already know what they could mean. Broken thermometer for Anne at the beginning of a journey. What a nightmare, I think. She would just be able to say it was cold, we were sweating, but no temperature, no precise temperature to be written down. Anne was and the gondola pins. There were actually gondola pins. She bought them in Venice, like on Gentleman Jack.
She actually bought 4 of them. One she kept to herself. One she gave to Isabella Norcliffe when she returned from the journey. One to V. Robarts in 1829, and then lastly to M. Walker in 1832. So in September 2020, we, as Gentleman Jack fans and Italians, most of all, we focus on John Walker Jr. because, as you know, he is currently mentioned in Gentleman Jack. So we first spoke to Raia from In Search of Anne Walker. She has been very supportive from the start. She's helped us to try to trace and find his death certificate. So by the end of the month, we had found John Walker's death certificate on the Italian ancestor portals for genealogical research. John Walker and Fanny arrived in Italy in October 1829. They actually stayed to an hotel called Hotel Royal, which Anne herself had visited during her stay in Milan, and she herself described it as the first-rate hotel in Milan with a very handsome entrance. From Milan, then moved to Genoa, then Florence, where we found their name mentioned in the registers of passports, then Rome, and lastly Naples. As you know, John Walker Jr. died in Naples on the 19th of January 1830. They were staying in Hotel Grande in Riviera di Chiaia, and in his death certificate, the cause of death is mentioned, of course, but apparently it was announced by 2 employees of the British Embassy in Naples. We believe that he chose that particular hotel because after reading Anne's remark in her journals about people who were suffering afflicted by tender lungs, in Naples, it was very common for people who got the same disease to live near the sea, the Bay of Naples, and of course to be cured with the Solfatara, which is an active volcano in Naples in the Florian fields, which were believed then that its toxic gas could cure it. So that's a supposition. That of course is, I'm from near Naples, and I've heard stories of people going to Naples to get cured. So John Walker is not the only one related to Anne and Italy. We know that Maria Barlow returned to Italy 2 years after her visit with Anne Lister. She settled in Florence, in Grand Duchy of Tuscany, and in the state archives of the city we found that not only did they visit Rome, Naples and Lucca, she was also presented at court by the British minister in Florence. She was living first in Via della Pergola, near the cathedral in Florence, and then moved in Casa Catania. If you read Lister Journal from 1833, she even mentioned Maria Barlow living in Piazza della Madonna degli Aldobrandini, near the Cappelle Medici. Okay, this is the passport, the copy of the passport of Maria Barlow that we found in Naples. You can see that Jane's name is noted down as Margherita. We believe it was a mistake, the courier maid, because it was Italian. Then Maria and Anne Lister met for the last time in 1833. That same year, Anne met Sophie Overall. She was Madame de Bourgh's young niece, and she was staying at her aunt's. Sophie Overall had Irish, Italian, Danish origins, and as you probably know, she had refused a Russian nobleman in 1833, and she herself confessed that to Anne Lister while they were traveling to Copenhagen. But what's surprising that Sophie herself married Federico Confalonieri, who was 27 years older than herself, and he was an Italian revolutionist who played an active role during the 1821 revolts. Sophie and Federico Confalonieri had met at Madame de Bourgh's. They married in 1841, and they soon settled in Milan. This is Palazzo Confalonieri that we also visited last year. And she fully embraced the Italian culture. She even gave her contribution to the first attempts of the Italian unification, and she herself saw that happening in 1862, because she died in Blevio, near Como, the Lake of Como, in 1868. This is one of the letters we have found in the Riksarkivet in Copenhagen.
We talk about Madame de Bourgh, but who is this lady?
I mentioned Madame de Bourgh as being Anne Lister's Parisian friend. She was actually Italian. Madame de Bourgh maiden name was Maria Assunta Leonida Butini. This is the baptism record we have found in the archives in Siena, where she was born in March 1764. Madame de Bourgh married before settling in Paris, where she met Anne Lister in 1830. She followed her husband, the Danish Count Edmund de Bourgh, in Italy, where they stayed for 18 months, I think, between the 1819 and 1820. Following her husband's death in Vichy in 1821, Madame de Bourgh stayed for a brief period at Windsor Castle, where she had been invited by the King of England. Apparently they were very close. In her testament, she also gave away one of the gifts she had from the king himself. She then settled in Paris, Her apartment in Rue du Faubourg Saint-Honoré soon became the center of worldly and political meetings as many Italians found solace. As we have recently found, you even needed a letter representation to be admitted to such a society, and that's where she and Anne Lister met in 1830, and volevo dire una cosa? Sorry. Despite their correspondence not being very constant between Anne Lister and Madame de Bourgh, we know that Anne Lister had always appreciated her support and their valuable help, especially when Anne Lister and Anne Walker were traveling to the Pyrenees in 1838. Anne even wrote to the Countess a letter before setting off for Russia, telling her all the information she had, excusing herself for not visiting Paris, and illustrating the journey she and Walker had made. Sadly, due to her delicate health, Madame de Bourgh couldn't return to Italy as she had planned in 1835, but she never forgot her motherland. We have found her will. In her will, she ordered that a large sum of money, 2,040 francs, should have been left to the French executors of her will to open a Pio Asili Butini, a charity nursery for poor women, and I'm quoting the will. After my death, I want a charity establishment to be opened in Siena, my native land in Italy, for poor women, unsound or invalid, where they can be looked after. This charity establishment was opened in 1822, and it's still open today, and it offers the same sort of personal assistance services. So she was a philanthropist.
But so you may see here all of Madame de Bourgh's fortune was her husband's. The overalls don't know her family. They don't know her family. She may leave all, and perhaps she will, to a stranger. So this was sort of a prophecy of Anne Lister.
Oh, this was a Sophie overall.
So sorry, yeah, but this was not the only prophecy we're going to talk about. In a way, we're talking about now something else we called it a prophecy, and that is something we have found in the archives. Now, this is a list of basically the archives we have been visiting and digging in these years. So they're quite a number, scattered here and there, online, many physically. We've been there, especially because in Italy the material is not always digitalized, like in this lovely place. But anyway, you see highlighted the Riksarkivet is the Danish National Archive. And why did we go there? We were tracking back some information about Sophie O'Farrell when we went there. And what happened was that we found loads of letters. We didn't expect them, but once we started reading them, we could reconstruct, first of all, we could reconstruct her family tree. So we connected her to Madame de Bourgh, how she was connected to Anne Lister's good friend. And amongst the many letters we found rich correspondence between these men, had Edward O'Farrell, who was one of Sophie O'Farrell's siblings. There were many. He was born in 1811, as you see, and Anne Lister had met him in Paris. So she had left us quite a few lines about him, a quick, clever guy. She had a good idea of him. But then they met again in 34 and 38. We can go on.
Okay.
What we have found is this.
Yeah, so we found, amongst all the letters we found one letter about, that mentions Anne Lister, written by Edward O'Farrell, Sophie's brother. As Lucia said, we know that he had met Anne. So, I must have seen her and talked to her, potentially a little bit at least. This letter, is full of details about Sophie's journey. Is writing to another one of the sisters, just giving an account of how the journey of Sophie and Anne was going. And one, I'm going to just read, this bit, which is the one that interested us, that he does mention Anne Lister. And to describe her to his other sister that never saw her or, met her, he writes, Miss Lister is really a phenomenon, one of the curiosities of the present day. Our great-grandchildren will certainly have the satisfaction of examining her in detail in a museum. Only think, she wears a men's nightcap. How fine she must look. So, of course, when we came across this, we were like, oh, wow, the first mention, we know that Anne writes about people and gives her impression and also kind of says, not only what she thinks, but maybe what they think of her sometimes. And this is probably, one of the few things that we have today where someone that has met Anne describes her to someone else. So, of course, it was not imagining Anne or anyone related to her reading this, probably. So that was quite, a discovery. But, we want to, give our interpretation of this, or just, some heads up about how we want to read it, and to not be kind of blinded by how we found some opinions about Anne. Let's take them by heart. So point is that, of course, we look at what he wrote. The first adjective that he uses about Anne is respectable. And I don't know what. Yeah, it's not here. I didn't do it. Well, he describes her. Yeah, he describes her as a respectable man, woman, and that catches our attention. That he uses man, woman, and without a doubt, it's a very strong way to describe her. And the appeal to read it with a modern eye, it's very strong, but we shouldn't forget that he was a man in 1830s, so it doesn't mean what we could think it means today, that kind of description of her. So we need to put it in, the context of the time, and also the society. Let's not forget, this is high society, higher than Anne, so we could, assume that even the way that she presented to them was kind of filtered and not, as she was. And so this is the first thing. The way it describes Anne tells us so much about what people and men specifically of the time thought how a woman should be, or what, she should do. We have also been wondering how the cultural context might have affected, influenced Edward's description, and how maybe the interest nurtured, like science, literature, the way in which she was peculiar sometimes, could have led him to use that kind of man, woman, as if woman wasn't enough. Other overall words express the personal point of view of someone who could hardly conceive a woman being like Anne Lister in the 1830s, for 1830 standards. Another interesting passage, of course, is the one we're looking at now, and we could read it in a poetic way and think, oh, we're doing exactly that. We do think that she is a phenomenon, she's amazing, we are enchanted by her. We are kind of examining her and studying her in detail. Not, kind of in a museum, but not really, but we are inside her thoughts. But also, as well as, the thing I mentioned before, for this section of the letter as well, we need to think about the context of the time. Science, the 19th century. He didn't mean it maybe in a poetic way. Maybe he really thought, how Anne started also exploring herself and studying herself, trying to figure out if there was something biologically different, scientifically different about her at the start, where discovery of herself, we have to take into account that it was impressive, the medical growth of the time, and the idea that people had about kind of, let's say, cutting people up to see how they were made inside. So, yes, we could read it in a poetic way, but let's not, we don't want to forget that this letter is rooted in 19th century, and it's by a man, and he could have had, an idea of what these things means, that it's quite literal and not as poetic as we might think today. So, of course, by now we've been reading many Edward's letters. There were a lot. So we do think that he was actually impressed by Anne. It's not a critique, or it doesn't want to ridicule her. It was just his impression. Yeah, he didn't have the words. Yeah. I feel like, I must say, and so. Yeah, we, of course, the more you read about also other people, the more you can put into context about what they meant, how they talked about people and things, and so have a more closer, if that's possible, view of the actual meaning of the words. But of course, what I think that we like to take from this letter is that Anne was impressive, maybe in a different way sometimes, then, as she's impressive now, today, 200 years later. And that is the end of our presentation about the things that we've done, we are doing, how we are doing them. I don't know if there are any
if you have
questions,
any questions to hear, for you. It's a lot to pack in 1 hour, and but if you have any curiosity, anything to ask, please. I'd glad to.
I have a question. When you do your research and you go amongst all your travels to all these places, I'm Carla from America, and come here to do my research. How do you go about, for each individually or collectively, navigate that with going to these places, organizing your visits? How much time do you spend there?
You mean to the archive or into the places?
Both. When you go to the archives, do you also delve into that city or that region or that country, or do you go back? It's a little outside question of the actual research, but I'm curious.
It's fine. Well, it's as you know, documents and old papers, they traveled a lot before coming into our hands. Like this letter was in Copenhagen, and it was actually it was sent from Paris to the Danish to the Danish islands,
U.S. Virgin Islands,
to the Virgin Islands, and then it came back to family archives. So in certain cases, when you go and find something in the archives, you find something that has nearly nothing to deal with where you are in that very moment. But
I'm usually the one that goes to the archives, either in Naples or in Florence. I usually go, but now it's been a long time because we have been so busy focusing on other Anne Lister research. But I usually go for a week, and spend 8 hours. It's not very easy because, as you probably know, Italy had consequences after the first revolutionary wars, then this First and Second World War. So most of the documents got lost or got burned. So it's not easy to mix research in Italy, but we are happy with what we have found, and we do hope to find more, of course.
And, yeah, and for the traveling part is I'm one of the Anne Lister travelers.
I wanted to say that there's one thing I admire about Italy. They put everything on newspapers. So we either found news on newspapers or all the books. Like we have found many references to Madame de Bourgh in Adams, the U.S. President journal, when Count de Bourgh and Countess de Bourgh were staying in Spain. So we look everywhere, and try to find new traces and proofs of what Anne Lister said. Like when she wrote down that Maria Barra lived in Florence, I was like, now I need to go to the archives. We got lucky because we have found firstly the proof that Maria Barra had been present at court on the genealogical research ancestry, and among the different Italian documents of 1815, we found this one, which is actually dated 1830. So we never get tired of finding new things.
But back to what I was saying is that once you have Anne's journals, you learn to trust her. Because if you travel, as we said, in many towns, there are so many things that are still there. And when I go to Verona, say, and I saw something that wasn't really, it didn't sound normal to me, because she was talking about half columns and a lower floor near a church, but I couldn't see anything. And then I thought, no, there must be something like that here nearby. So I started lowering, just walking like this, and looking in those lower windows, lower grated windows, and I could find actually there was a lower level, a lower street hidden into a palace today, and there were half columns. So I actually found what she described. Mm-hmm. So she, in the end, 90.9% of the time, she's right.
Can I ask you, how did they travel in Italy? Did they travel in a private coach, or were they using public stagecoaches?
They used a private coach.
Yeah.
They had, we have been studying that. They've been
I remember they hired one in Switzerland. When they were in Switzerland, they traveled to Italy with that coach, and they actually returned to Italy in September. And I think when they got in France, they traveled by public coach.
Yeah.
To return to
because she hadn't
Paris.
Inherited the Lister coach.
No,
so she wasn't using that. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
And also, even when she was traveling during the journey itself, she sometimes had to switch and hire another carriage because of the roads were sometimes too narrow or not. They would not suit to the carriage they had. So they had to go on, see what Anne wanted to see, and then go back and fetch the carriage.
Even when she returned to Italy with a worker in 1834, she left the carriage somewhere, and then arrived in the Aosta Valley, hiring another one, because it's a valley. It's near Mont Blanc, so it's not safe for the carriage itself. So Anne did return.
So she ended up on horseback sometimes then to get places. Yeah.
In the Aosta Valley, yes. When they traveled to Aosta, Courmayeur, they had to. Otherwise, they would have got stuck somewhere.
She also had to walk a lot next to the carriage or ahead, because as it happened in those days, when to unburden the horses, passengers would get off and walk next to the carriage, and of course was far ahead. And sometimes she would, at the very beginning of the journey, she said, I was too far ahead. I had to go back and reach them.
Yeah, we do know that because we got Anne workers' journals, because there is no entry in Anne's journal between the 9th and the 21. So we used and transcribed Anne workers' journals to trace their footsteps here in Italy, which was then the Kingdom of Sardinia, but now it's part of Italy.
Another funny thing we can have is, have you all seen season 2 of Gentleman Jack, I think? And so she mentioned, when Anne tells about herself smuggling handkerchiefs. Yeah. So she said, we were stopped by the Sardinian Carabinieri. Well, the Carabinieri are a police corps still today, but they were just they'd just been created from 15 years or so when that episode happened. And the Sardinian Carabinieri, well, Sardinia is the island next. Yeah. So today it is an island, but the Kingdom of Sardinia included this whole part. Sorry, it included this whole part here. It's here and included here. So when she and Walker came to Italy, they basically came again into that, and that's why they met the Sardinian Carabinieri.
Yeah.
But the funniest thing is that we still today make jokes about the Carabinieri. So that's how it started. So Anne Lister was the first making jokes about the Carabinieri for us. But this is what we do, what we are still doing. We are still working on this Italian journey because it's what next? Ha! What next? We are currently really working hard on the Italian journey because there is a lot. We are trying to write something. I'm saying it. Yeah, I know it's those things. It's the creature is there, but we are quite quite ahead on the way. On the process, but it's a long thing because we're still checking for every place she visited. What was there? What's today? So it's you can see how and how much she did write about every place. We have been contacted by a person who is studying the silk history in Italy, which was very important at the time Anne visited. And she was impressed by the fact that Anne being a woman again, she described the silk connected activity. So the bozzoli, silkworms. Well, I missed the word now. Sorry, apologies because English is not our first language, of course. But she describes a lot of plants and activities connected to this, and so she said it's terribly interesting and rare because there's not so many information in that time about these activities. So that would be important for us. That would help to add something to the story of silk. But this is with Anne, with so many other subjects.
Were they actually making silk in Italy then?
Yeah,
because it had to be smuggled out of China, didn't it?
They
secret of making anything, a bit like.
Italy. I don't know the earliest origins, but the silk industry.
King James I tried to do it in England and bought the wrong mulberries. It was tricky.
Yeah.
We've got all these mulberries that don't make silk.
No, but until as far as I recall, the early 20th century, silk industry in Italy was really renowned and high quality, top quality products. So even when Anne goes and buys socks, she goes looking for socks and she buys good silk, and that's very interesting because it adds to the story of our country as well, and so many other things. But so next thing is we are going on with our daily or almost daily updates and researches.
And we got a lot of ongoing projects. It's non-stop.
Yeah, yesterday we were here the whole day and we found some other, in the letters especially, some other things and notes and we already saw them how to merge into the researches we have already published. So there will be updates to those researches and every time we go in an archive, or we hardly leave any stone unturned.
Yeah, and also as you saw, I mean, we started with Anne and her journey to Italy, but then we're looking at profiles of people that really we do have an account of them because of Anne. Some things about Italians that she met, I mean, just comes from the diary. It's very difficult to find them in archives and trying to make out who they were or what they did. For example, with Madame de Bourg, I mean, she was quite impressive herself, and we wouldn't. And I mean, yeah, if we would have not known of her if it wasn't for Anne. It's really also that one of our points. Once you find another remarkable person, mostly a woman, like that, to kind of, and being she being Italian, trying to find as much as you can, starting from Anne and then going into our history and documents and archives and trying to place the bits together. And of course, that's a never-ending research. Yes.
So, thank you again for coming.